Oh, we are live. Good evening and welcome to SciTrek, your sci-fi TV and movie channel. And tonight I have young Mike with me, who is a newbie to the SciTrek family, but very welcome new friend to the channel. Say hello, Mike.
Hello there. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm not sure if I'm the youngest co-host you've ever had, but I'll take that as a compliment. Lovely to be here. I've only recently sort of discovered your channel through my podcast colleague, Martin Fowler, and I'm a huge Stargate fan. So as he has done as well recently, I often just come to your channel for Stargate news. You know, fingers crossed that we're going to get something in the not too distant future. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm hopeful and pessimistic. So I don't know. We have to see how it goes, won't we? So, yeah.
Well, I will tell you something about that after I do that little intro.
Okay, go for it.
That's all it is, just short, 2 seconds.
It's all right. It's good.
But I can't really tell you much details with this, but I am hearing rumblings. Basically, we've got the Mark Fergus Penguin and a Parker. Looks like that deal is sort of being negotiated at the moment, and they're going to develop new Stargate.
Right.
But I've always said they needed another production company or someone else to actually make the show, a bit like The Expanse.
Right.
So, Penguin and a Parker developed, and they were executive producers. And Amcron actually made the show. They were the production company.
Okay.
It looks like there might actually be a deal being negotiated for that production company. But at the moment, it's all rumors. So the sources that I speak to...
concrete evidence is what you're saying. It's
yeah, I'm waiting for a bit of evidence to back it up.
Right.
But what the rumors I'm hearing, I'll go as far as saying they make sense.
Okay. I have seen The Expanse. I thought The Expanse itself as an entire series was very, very well made. I think it's one of the best contemporary sci-fi shows I've seen. I think, if I'm right, they did... because it went at one point to Amazon. I know that it's been all over the place. It got renewed, and it only finished. Is it last year? It wasn't that long ago. It finished.
Yeah, early 22.
And it's just a shame because I wish I think there's like 8 books in the original novelization.
9. So we've still got essentially 3 seasons that could be made, and there's been a load of additional books and little short stories that span the 30 years, because between 6 and 7 there's actually a 30-year gap.
Oh, right. Really? That's
there are short stories and stuff that fill that gap. There are lots of rumors that The Expanse still could return. The current, my understanding currently is that Amazon have distribution rights on anything new, so they have rights to the show until early next year.
Right.
Amcron actually own the IP. Amazon don't. They just own the distribution rights.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, that's an interesting.
The current deal means that Amcron can't make anything for anybody else until that deal runs out.
Right.
The HBO Max are very interested, but skint.
Okay.
And Apple TV is the most recent one I've heard of.
I mean, HBO, I've just started watching The Last of Us. I've seen the first 2 episodes of that, and I think so far that's really good.
It's fantastic and really good.
Apple, I've seen Foundation and For All Mankind. Both series I've thoroughly enjoyed as well. So it's interesting how potentially one of these companies could get involved in making it in the future or something. I hope so. You know, it'd be great if it came back. I mean,
Apple are desperate to get a big sci-fi franchise. Apparently, they did try to buy MGM. Okay. Before they tried to buy MGM, they tried to get MGM to produce Stargate for them. Apparently,
right.
They've tried to get a Star Trek show, you know, like Amazon did with Picard. They tried to negotiate a deal.
Oh, okay.
Well, before Paramount Plus
took over and obviously helmed it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But they've been desperately scrapping around to try to get themselves a sci-fi franchise. So we'll see how that develops. But
I mean, I think Foundation is certainly a very strong contender. It's only, from what I've seen of it, it's only one season. I think they're in production of season 2. And I did like the cast. I remember there was an episode with Alexander Siddig made an appearance. Obviously, he played Bashir in DS9. It was nice to see him in one episode. And I just thought it was just a very well made sci-fi series, and I think that it's not well known. I mean, I'm quite a sci-fi geek, so I do tend to find out about these things, but I don't know whether in your circles whether it's well known yourself or your colleagues as well. I mean,
I was aware only because I've read the books, but a colleague I do, Stormy Bear, obviously regular sidetrackers know Stormy Bear. He was a big nut on it, and he actually just happened to ask me once, "Have you heard anything about a Foundation series?" And that's how I found out, because I thought, I don't know, mate. So I sort of asked, and somebody went, "Yeah, it's going to be on Apple next year." I was like, "Oh, okay."
And there it was. There it goes. And it was obviously had a lot of money pumped into it, because it looked like it was a pretty well polished production. And so
I would say, out of the streaming services, Apple are the only cash-rich streaming service right now.
Oh, that's interesting. So why are they so strong compared to other streaming services at the moment? Is
Amazon,
it new, or
Amazon have lost a lot of money due to lots of projects that were due to, like, the drone project and things like this, that were just stupid. But also, I mean, I think they overinvested during COVID, and for some reason they didn't seem to realize that that their growth would slow after COVID. But so they've lost significant money. Disney Plus loses about $500 million a quarter, apparently. Just trying to it was all planned, but it's all propped up by the rest of the Disney corporation.
Well, it's such a big corporation, it's such a huge entity that it can absorb those hits, at least. But I would assume that it's not indefinite. Eventually, they're going to have to think about how we're going with this thing. They
were supposed to be starting to make money this quarter, but it hasn't gone to plan, because obviously now we've had the slowdown. But they're still losing money hand over fist. Paramount owe about $16 billion and don't really know how to pay it, and HBO Discovery owe nearly $50 billion. So
so
we all know about Netflix's debts as well. So
there must be some executives who are probably having some sleepless nights, I would have thought, with all that kind of like in the background, you know.
Well, with the slowdown as well of the streaming wars, this is why I think a lot of projects that we thought, again, like I said, we thought were nailed on 6 months ago or a year ago, and now not have, like the Battlestar Galactica. Well, we're going to be talking about reboots, so we are going to talk about that. PSG. So there was supposed to be another Battlestar Galactica reboot.
I heard about that. Yep.
Both look like they're not happening. There's been all sorts of projects that I've talked about on this channel that are just was about Stargate.
Yep.
It seems to be being slowed down, and money seems to be the main issue.
Well, from my perspective, I think we all know this is quite obvious that obviously during the COVID pandemic, people were at home more and they wanted entertainment, and this is why everything kind of took off, and which was something which was going to be likely to happen eventually. You know, I know we're not quite in normality, but it is feeling a bit more before the pandemic came down. And of course, now people are able to go out and focus on other things and spend money in different ways. Plus, of course, you know, there's recessions and there's all sorts of things going on, which of course has hit the streaming sites. And of course, another problem is that there are so many competitors. You know, we've already mentioned quite a few of them. There's only enough room for. It's a bit like the old days of you know, like BBC, ITV channel, you know, like a few main ones, where of course now, obviously live TV is different from streaming, but there are so many options that people, and that's the problem is, of course, is that often you have one show that you really like on one streaming service, but that's it. And then you've got lots and lots of stuff, which, it's nice, it's there, but it might not be something that you would particularly want to watch. And so, you know, that's the problem. Everything's so splintered now. And I'm a person who still likes the old days of physical media. I like the fact that, you know, I still occasionally go into. There is an HMV where I'm living, which is amazing. I discovered it recently.
I've got one in our centre as well.
And I went in there and I saw all the shows I liked. And of course, you know, you got to pay for them. But that to me is, it can't be taken away. And my problem with certain streaming sites is that you can be a big fan of some show. It's really good. And like every 6 months, a year, you go back, you get a replay, and then there's been some kind of finance issue or some other rights of copyrights or something's gone to another company, and it's gone. And then, for instance, it's like someone coming into your house. Obviously, not really, but like taking your CDs, your favorite DVD films, and like, sorry, you can't watch it anymore, mate. Bye, and that's it. You've lost it. That's why I'm still quite pro physical media, I think, and it's just nice to it's old fashioned, but it's strange, isn't it?
I barely ever watch my DVDs anymore. I have to admit, barely ever.
Yeah,
but, yeah. It's but I got Disney Plus, and it's like that's the best one for me. But anyway, let's get on about
sorry, of course,
this evening. So we're going to talk about reboots. Why the bloody hell does Hollywood seem to love a reboot, a remake, a sequel, a prequel, and all this rubbish? So is it just that they're lazy? Is it just that they've run out of ideas, which is a comment I get a lot on my channel?
I personally think it's lack of confidence in new ideas. The fact of the matter is that they've got a good chance, if they go back to a well-established brand name, that the people of the old fan base, or the old show or film or whatever, can think, oh, I remember that show. Oh, this is a new version. Let's check it out. And I think personally, it's partly lack of creativity. But I think it's a financial asset. That it's basically aspect that it's lack of confidence. But let's try remaking V. Let's try remaking Battlestar Galactica. Let's try almost rebooting Star Trek with the Kelvin timeline films.
Yeah.
Although it's that aspect. I mean, how do you see it? What do you think about it?
I don't believe it's a lack of creativity. I think there are producers out there and writers that are just as creative as they ever have been. I mean, just look at YouTube, and there's so many different ways people can now express their creativity, and there's some
really amazing stuff.
We're just as creative as it always has been. I think there's maybe a lack of confidence from executives sometimes, like you said, to spend a lot of money. Even cheap TV shows nowadays cost $2-3 million an episode.
Yes,
right. The more expensive ones. I mean, we're looking at Stargate. We're looking at anything between $60 and $100 million for 10 episodes.
Yeah, exactly.
The new Airbender TV show is costing $15 million an episode to produce.
Incredible amount of money.
Yeah, I mean, that's just insane. And obviously, we know Lord of the Rings and Rings of Power are what
huge, yeah.
So there's a lot of money goes on these things. I think, though, the hardest thing for any new show, regardless if it's a reboot, whatever, is getting people interested to watch it. And even if you see, like the Ark, the new TV show that's going to be on Sci-fi shortly, all the advertising is from the makers of Stargate, because they've got to get that hook.
Yes, familiarity for people who think, oh yes, I'll try that. It's a link.
I need something. And I think there's an element of we want to feel like we're connected to it somehow. And if there's that connection through something we've seen before, we're more likely to watch it again.
Yeah, I agree entirely. But it is a strange thing. I mean, one thing which surprises me is that often with these streaming sites, they want to have a large amount of content. And of course, back in the day, you'd get, like with Star Trek, you get 26 episodes a season. And of course, now they tend to make a much more expensive production per episode, but say half of that, even less than that, half of that per season, which I always think of it as a strange contradiction, because you can do some really good stuff. I mean, I think that Stargate itself, the SG-1, Atlantis, I think they still, yes, they are a bit dated to a degree, but they just look so good to watch. It's just the visual eye candy of just the Stargate whirring into shape, or gold attack attacking, and death gliders, and I loved all that, and I'm amazed that they can't find a way of doing something which still looks good and doesn't narrow the amount of episodes per season. But it seems to be like the standard norm these days, that it is big episodes but fewer episodes per season. So strange.
There's I think when we're talking about streaming services, I think there's a double-edged sword there, because I think in one respect there's an advantage that they can, and I think they're only just starting to really realize this, that they can release episodes any way they like. They can do as many episodes as they like. So they're not set to having to do like 22 episodes to fit the calendar sort of thing of the old networks. So they always had to be set to this many episodes. Sometimes they did 12 and they would have like 2 different series, but mostly they were like, right, we want a season of blah, blah, blah. And you got to do 22 episodes or 24, depending on whether it's the spring or autumn. Because at autumn, they tend to do a few less because they then go into a Christmas specials and things.
Yeah.
But on a streaming service, you can do however many episodes you need for the story. So again, going back to Stargate, apparently what Amazon have actually asked for in their brief, when they've sent a brief out to companies to say, we want you to pitch for this, and they've asked for 8 to 12 episodes as an initial season. Right. And then the creator can then sort of say, well, our story needs 11.
So they can work it out that way, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Look at the Sandman from Netflix last year. They just dropped a bonus episode at the end that no one knew about.
I never saw that. I didn't know they did that. That's quite interesting.
Yeah. You can't do that on a network, but you can on a streaming service. So, I mean, there's double-edged sword. But I don't honestly know why they've gone into this formula of like 10 episodes.
I mean, it was like
they always do now, and I don't know why.
It's like when Star Wars Andor came out, the first 2 or 3 episodes were released at once on the same day. I think for that show, it's because it was like that show had like 3 episode arcs, and then it would go to the next arc. I think that's partly why they did it. But as you say, they could never have done that in the olden days on a network because it just doesn't work that way. So, I mean, let's ask about, obviously there are remakes and things like that. And I was thinking before I joined today about the best remakes that I've come across, how predominantly most of them for me don't work. I would say that one of the most successful remakes, and you probably would agree, actually maybe you won't, is probably Battlestar Galactica, the remake done in
I think I think you could argue it's the only successful remake.
I agree.
If we're ignoring movies, so we're just
TV shows, yeah, okay.
And obviously we're only talking about sci-fi because we're a sci-fi channel.
Sure.
But I mean, I actually struggle to create a very long list of remakes, like full proper remakes where they've pretended the original didn't happen, a hard reboot.
I can think of a few, but I know what you mean. It's not a
there's not loads.
Massive in sci-fi. No, I agree about it. I mean,
I think people think there are more because it feels like it's happening, But a lot of the time they're continuations rather than full hard reboots. But my list is like Battlestar Galactica, Lost in Space.
Yes,
I believe Knight Rider did one back in the 90s.
I heard that's terrible. I heard it was terrible. Yes, I've heard about
it. Was
that.
Awful,
that made a remake. Yeah,
I can't remember if it was a remake or a continuation, but V
was a remake.
Charmed.
Never saw that, but yeah, I know.
No, I didn't either. But and I really struggled after that to really think of many continuations. Quite a few.
I can think of a few British ones. I mean, let me say. Okay, sorry, I was going to say that the British ones of remakes I can think of are The Day of the Triffids, which was made in 1981. It was remade in about 2009. That was a remake. Survivors, which was made in the 70s, got remade in about the early 2000s. That's 2.
It did, yeah.
What else got remade? They're the 2 I can think of off the cuff.
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy has been remade.
That was remade as a film, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was a BBC 2 series, and then they've made a film, yeah.
Yeah, that's another one.
Films have had a few sort of like reboots, and they think like they always try to make Americans always try to make these stupid films into comedies. Baywatch was awful.
Baywatch nice.
Starsky and Hutch was almost.
Oh yes, yeah, I've heard about that. Yeah, I didn't. I like the old shows, but I just saw like the poster for like Starsky and Hutch with was it Adam Sandler in it? I can't remember who was it.
It was Owen Wilson. Oh no, Starsky and Hutch was no, it's the one that looks like Adam Sandler but isn't Adam Sandler. He's always angry. Oh shit! He was in Mystery Men.
That's going to bug us now, isn't it? I can't.
Yeah. Somebody in the comments will normally tell us what we're trying to remember.
Okay.
The little fellow is in Mystery Men or whatever. And along came Polly, and I've got my phone in.
I was about to get mine, but I think you beat me to it, so I'll let you.
And Owen Wilson, wasn't it? I think.
Owen Wilson, yeah. Was that Owen Wilson from Back to the Future? Yeah, I'm not sure.
Ben Stiller.
Ben Stiller, that's it.
So, but yeah, that was awful. The A-Team I actually quite liked, to be honest, but the Dukes of Hazzard was really bad. Johnny Knoxville, and the other fella. It was just awful. And they've tried to do that lots of times over the years, and it just does not work.
Well, I think I know, like I said, some of these aren't quite sci-fi, so I apologise for going slightly off topic. But I think the reason why some of these don't work is because they were a product of the time. They worked when they were made, and the world has changed a bit, quite a lot actually. And when they try to emulate for a new audience based on how an original show was pitched and agreed and made, it doesn't work. That's the strange thing. With Battlestar Galactica, the 70s show, I like the 70s show. I even watched Galactica 1980, so that's how much of a fan I was.
With the flying bikes and everything,
yeah, and Cylon and Halloween and everything else as well. But when the remakes, Ronald D. Moore did it, I think, and of course he was on Star Trek. They just made such an interesting spin on the original. They made it very, very different, but in a way that's just really, really worked. It felt contemporary, but it was also recognizable to the original fan base. Now, I don't know, because I'm not a huge Battlestar Classic fan, what the classic fans thought of the new show, whether it was like when the Next Generation came out. I know this was it was a continuation rather than a remake, so it's slightly different. But do you know about the original classic, whether it was well received by classic fans?
When it was first announced, it wasn't popular. But whenever anything's announced like that, it's not popular. When the Next Generation was announced, people went crazy. Trekkies went nuts. But yeah, it was not popular. But again, Battlestar Galactica was a little bit before the internet age. So it just sort of nipped in before, a lot of social media. So I think it got away with a lot. But yeah, I don't think it was massively But the main thing, I think the focus went on Starbuck and recasting Katie Sackhoff,
which was really, really clever idea. And Katie Sackhoff was really, really good as the female Starbuck. I liked her.
But I think that took a lot of the heat.
Yeah, I think that was a clever way of doing it.
Especially when Dirk Benedict came out and went, "How can they make Starbuck a woman?" and was like shit steering it a little bit. And then I can only imagine the executive producer. So somebody got hold of him, and then he actually met Katie Sackhoff, and he actually went, okay, this is actually a brilliant idea.
I know he mellowed, but I didn't know that. I can understand though, because he would be defensive from the fact that he was Starbuck.
Yeah,
so you can understand that it's going to be. But then wasn't the guy that played Apollo going to be involved with some remake of Battlestar or something?
The guy who played Apollo was in the first series.
Richard Hatch.
Yeah, he played played a politician or something, didn't he?
But I think at some point before the Battlestar remake, he was wanting to do some remake or continuation of Battlestar himself. And it didn't happen. And I think in the end, he still appeared, as you say, as the politician in the remake. And he was finding his character was interesting. So it is interesting how, sometimes even actors and stars of these shows, they really get heavily involved in trying to bring these shows back, whether it be a remake or normally more likely to be a continuation, which is, wasn't it the guy that played John Shepherd in Atlantis? He was the one that didn't he really push to get Atlantis coming back?
He tried to buy it. He tried to buy it.
That's right. I can't think of his name, but yeah, I know. Yeah, and obviously it didn't happen.
But yeah, oh God, I do know his name. It's gone. But
as well. You know what I mean, though.
Yeah. He tried to he publicly tried to buy the franchise from MGM to produce a new series. Obviously, MGM weren't interested, but to focus on Battlestar Galactica for a minute, then we'll talk about why we think other remakes haven't worked. Why did Battlestar Galactica work when other ones? And I will say very quickly as well, I think Battlestar Galactica wandered towards the end.
A lot of people felt the fourth season. A lot of people said that it did lose the track of what it was doing a bit in that last season. I actually didn't mind the last season. I think it worked. Combination of things. Like I said before, it was a very unique take on a familiar named brand of sci-fi show. It had a really, really good cast. It had really good special effects. The Battlestar Galactica itself was really cool. And of course, we even had like the Battlestar Pegasus at one point as well. I like the fact that it did embrace, even though it was a remake, it like you had some classic Cylons in some of the later episodes.
Yeah.
And I just think that it was unique enough that I don't know how do I answer that question. It just worked. I don't know why it just worked. It just something about it, the way it came across, the way it was written, worked. I really can't
Yeah.
answer any better than that. Really, I'm sorry, but it just worked.
I think they had. I think they walked a really fine line between the original and the thing. Like, so, for example, they had the new sort of fighter, didn't they? The Viper at the
Viper,
start of the
yeah.
thing, and it was a different design.
They had
And then
old ones and new ones, didn't they?
Yeah, and then they
That's
brought in the old one to sort of, and then they very cleverly wrote that in and said, "Oh well, all the new ones are digital and they've been blasted, and we have got to." So they had enough sense,
Yeah.
and the Galactica looked kind of the same. So I think they
Yes.
walked a really fine line between updating and keeping the original.
Yeah.
And they did the same with the story.
Yeah.
They very cleverly had a story that was its core the same as the original.
Yes,
But
they were trying to find a place home because the obviously the parts of the can't think what they're called. What was it? Where they lived? Colony. So, that's it. Yeah, the colonies were destroyed.
They're trying to find the 13th colony. And they were trying to, but they added enough that it was different enough that it wasn't just basically recreating the original. So, but I think Ronald D. Moore particularly, he was very, very clever in that respect.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of other remakes and things, and particularly I'm thinking maybe movies and stuff, haven't worked because somebody will come in and they'll say, right, well, we have to change it. We have to make it. And they go maybe too far, or they change things that don't need to be changed.
Well, as we're talking about movies, although we're sticking with TV, the prime example for me is probably the Kelvin Star Trek films. How they did try to, they recast everything, and they had a new Enterprise, and the Klingons looked different. And I don't mind the Kelvin films as much as some people. I just see them as their own thing, but it was a reboot. And it really was. And this is the problem. I mean, some people are even saying that potentially, although it's a prequel, it's like, do you think of Strange New Worlds is a sort of reboot because they've redesigned the Enterprise? The Enterprise looks different. How do you feel about that?
I think they're in danger of becoming a reboot. Yeah. At the moment, I hate prequels. Like I say, everybody, there's like 50 people watching right now, and they're all going to go, yeah, Jamie hates prequels. They generally piss on canon, and they wind me up. Strange New Worlds is really at risk of basically remaking the original series.
Right.
They're not very careful, and they are already rewriting the history. The characters are so brilliant, I don't think anyone will really care too much. I do think they have redesigned the Enterprise a little bit, but I think they did it on purpose because it's supposed to look like a slightly earlier version of the Enterprise, like it would then be refit
to the TOS era. Oh, okay, version, that's quite.
And then refit again to the movie version. So it's supposed to look older. And that's
wouldn't it be great in the very last episode of Strange New Worlds, it comes in for a refit and then it looks just like the original series Enterprise. It comes out the space dock. You've got the original bridge and the original sound effects, actually, which they're still used in this. And I would love that. That would be for a geek like me, that would be like, yes, that'd be great. It won't happen, though.
Well, I think with modern CGI and stuff as well, it's difficult to do and it look right. They can make the ship look more realistic now. So
well, I mean,
never going to quite look the same as the
a lot of people said how when you saw the original Enterprise bridge, or it's actually the sister ship Defiant, in the episode 2-part episode In a Mirror Darkly on Enterprise, how it looked just so cool because it was lit differently. And although it was like a 40-year-old design when that was made, it still looked really, to me at least, I thought it looked really good because it was much darker lit, there was different shadows, and it just gave it that kind of extra sort of like, it fitted with canon, but it also, because filming techniques are now that lighting is different, it just really worked. So it's interesting, isn't it? I don't know.
I think as well, like, technology's advanced so far though as well, that a lot of, whenever you remake anything sci-fi from like 20 years ago, even like The Next Generation, we watch The Next Generation now and you sort of like, that computer's slow as fuck compared to that, now.
Really,
And
L cars, it's rubbish. Yes, it's shite. Yes,
our technology's overtook it.
Yeah.
So then, when they make a prequel, like in Strange New Worlds now, they're sort of like, well, if we use the same technology, with flick buttons and things, as the original series from 1969, it's going to look stupid because we've already got much better, big like block cards that have data thing they put in.
Oh, the ones that used to go in the panels, yes, with the button yes.
They're going to look like dicks. So they've got to change some bits.
That has to be. You have to do that for a new audience. Yes, I understand that completely. And I do think, actually, although they've had to, I think on the whole, they've actually done quite well, as you've already said, at respecting canon. Like I said, it's not a proper reboot, but it's like a reboot, which is why we're discussing in this episode.
Yeah.
I think for one, that show works. But of course,
it would be a soft reboot, the current Strange New Worlds, because anything with like where you've got the story existed, but you've got different actors playing the characters, that is a reboot. It's a different sort of reboot, but it's a soft reboot. So, but Star Trek and canon, Star Trek's always danced around canon. Yeah. It's never been
every show has everything always has some contradiction because it's such a huge tapestry of episodes and storylines. I mean, they try to hold it together, but sometimes things fail, and you'll get someone like me saying, "Oh, I remember that episode in season 2, episode 3, where Strange like that. That character shouldn't." You got to. You can't be that set in stone. I think that's.
You said the frequency of the warp bubble was 23595 in episode. Yeah, I get. No, and I think people need to calm down and things like that because sometimes the story, and I think we said this on even your podcast. Sometimes the story just needs to happen. Calm down. Just
enjoy it. Just enjoy it. Let it go. Just let it go through and
I think there is a line. Yeah, I think there is a line that you should respect because we are geeks.
Yeah,
and we do. So like we know how many decks there are in the Enterprise. You really should focus on that and not say completely.
Yeah, because the Enterprise F was movie. And Enterprise First Contact, there was 27 decks, and then later on they said we just captured the Borg in deck 29 or something.
Yeah, it's 24, 27, 29 or more.
Yeah, it was something like that. I know that it was something different, and there was a discrepancy in the film. And I need to get a life sometimes, so I do apologize for the. Yeah, I do notice things.
Oh no, I'm in the cinema going. It's only got 24 decks. How did Riker just throw that guy off a bridge downwards on deck 29? And I'm getting angry in the movie. I came out of the first J.J. Abrams movie furious. They fucking made the Enterprise water powered, and I was really.
It's like a brewery, wasn't it? It was like a distillery or something. It was the engine. It was like, what the was that? It was like, it was really quite bizarre.
Not a Star Trek movie, basically. They're just not Star Trek movies. They're good films and they're entertainment. And if you love a lens flare, they're amazing. But they're not Star Trek films.
Well. That was probably Discovery. Discovery took on a lot of the mantle of the Kelvin universe films, and the first two. I was going to say this. I don't think you've seen the later seasons, but if you look at the turbolift shafts in the later seasons, they are huge. You see a ship turbolift going down, and it's like a city. And it's like, who the hell designed that?
I know what you mean. Yeah, I've seen it.
Why would they do that? It's just they do things sometimes like you don't need to do that. Whether it's being a reboot or a reimagination,
this wasn't
need to do that.
No, it's just there's so many bits in Star Trek that we could get angry about, particularly Disco, that aren't worth it really. But so Battlestar Galactica, I think it worked because they walked that line.
Right.
Between changing it. I actually think another series that I actually really enjoyed, but people generally didn't, was the remake of Lost in Space.
I preferred that to the original. The original for me was a bit too campy. I liked the original, but for some reason, I watched the remake. I think only a couple of years ago it finished, but I thought it was really solid. Actually, I thought it was a really well made thing. Yeah. So.
And I think they did a similar thing there, though. They had the original story. They changed it so that it made sense because the original story didn't really. Not with what we know about sort of technology and things now, I think we'd all sort of we could all, how's it got lost basically. But the Jupiter was kind of similar. They kept the designs kind of similar. They got the robot was great.
Yes.
Danger Will Robinson, they'd still, that. So they brought enough of these little things in for us to go, I love that bit, without going, too far. I think the only downside of Lost in Space was that it's maybe a little boring. It was maybe they could have sped up the pace a little bit.
So, I mean, how many episodes did they make? Because it was it 3 seasons?
I don't know if they did 3 seasons or 4. I think it's 3 seasons, and it's like 10 or 12 episodes a season. So they made like 30 hours. Okay. And I liked it. I just think it was it was a little slow at places. But I like the actors. I thought the special effects were great. It cost a lot of money to make. That's the only reason Netflix didn't make another one. So yeah, I mean, I really loved it. It was like, and I thought it was clever, and they walked that line beautifully.
To me, that was a successful reboot remake. That was another one that actually one of the few that did work. I have to ask you: did you originally watch the original V series, the mini series from the 80s, and then
I remember very well.
I loved the original series. I loved it. I absolutely adored it. And of course, they made the remake with the actress who plays, is it Vala on SG1?
Marina Barakin.
Yeah, who's a great actress.
Yeah. What do you think of that? And think. I thought it was. Do you know what? I did watch it at the time. I couldn't tell you a damn thing that happened in it. Now it was very forgettable, and I'm not 100% certain it made sense. The original, I always thought, was so clever, and I thought the special effects stand up even today because they kept them really simple. The newer storyline, it tried to go along the same storyline. I remember like the camps and stuff that they had, the alien camps on the surface and things, and how some people turned against it and stuff. And so I remember bits.
Fifth column was the fifth column that was called. It had like this rebellion kind of thing.
But generally speaking, it was just very, very forgettable, and I'm not surprised at all it didn't work.
Okay, it's a shame. It is a shame that
it should have done.
I mean, with V, the V had originally had the miniseries, then it had the final battle, then it had one season afterwards, which was just like 20 just standalone episodes, and by that point you could tell that a lot of the actors were slowly moving on as the show continued, and you could tell that the budget was pretty basic. But the original miniseries, I remember, I think it was on. I'm not a sports fan, but I know you're quite a football fan, but I remember the Olympics. I think it came out in 1984. This should show my age, and it was one summer, and what they did, it was the miniseries was shown after Olympic Games or something, and I never forgot it because you didn't get a lot of sci-fi on ITV in the 80s kind of thing. And I fell in love with it, and ever since then I've adored it. So when we had the remake, to me, I don't know, just something just wasn't there. I didn't like the design of the ships either. I know that's not a big thing, but I loved the white shuttles and the fighters in the original series, which I know it doesn't matter, but I'm quite geeky about my ships. It just didn't stand out, did it? It didn't kind of. I can't even remember it that well, even though I've seen it twice. I didn't dislike it, but it didn't have that oomph that Battlestar had as a remake. It's strange, isn't it?
And another thing about Battlestar was that it stood out creatively so much as well. I mean, you can tell how it won so many awards for the special effects and the look of the show and everything they put into it. And you can tell that because so many shows have copied it since.
Sure.
Stargate SGU copied it.
I was going to say that. I did notice that straight away.
V just didn't do that. It didn't stand out at all. There was nothing in it really that was memorable, and that's the problem. And I watched it at the time. I can remember that there's the blonde girl in it who I can't tell you, but she's been in a few things since. She's in some werewolf show after it, but like I say, that's none of the character stuff. I personally love Marina, but in that she's forgettable. She had the short hair. Oh my god, I'm a sucker for a girl with short hair. But even that, it's just nothing could save that show because creatively it just wasn't there. It just wasn't imaginative enough. But
It
you
is
know, like,
strange.
it is a shame that I say this though as well that they make a lot of remakes and like reboots and things, but Hollywood and stuff do make a lot of new TV shows as well.
Yeah.
I do think a lot of people think, "Oh God, it's another reboot." It's another reboot. I do think there's a place for a remake and a reboot. The biggest shows though in the last few years have been original stuff based on books, maybe, but original. The biggest sci-fi shows or biggest fantasy shows, Game of Thrones. That wasn't a remake. I know they've now made a prequel, but Stranger Things, you know, it was original. I
What
don't
did
even think that was
you?
based on books, was it? I'm not sure.
I mean,
Um,
this is the film side of things, but we've got to talk about this. What do you think of June the original and June the remake? I know it's only half the remake so far I've seen.
I enjoyed the original, but it
Okay.
was it is hard watching because it's quite slow.
Okay.
And obviously it's dated.
Yeah,
But
which doesn't
generally
always. It's not always a factor, but for me,
beautifully made.
it's too
Just
slow for me.
Judah Khan, hi. Your channel is rapidly become one of my favorite YouTube channels. Keep up all the good work and thanks for the work you do. Thank you, sir. Thank you. And he's here for every live show. He's absolutely brilliant.
Okay.
Thank
Nice
you.
one. Brilliant.
And thank you so much for the little donation. Every little helps. I'm like Tesco's. Every little helps.
You was going to say that.
Yeah. I'm going down to 4 days a week in my proper job soon.
Okay. So this will help you out a bit more. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so that's going to be my every little helps. But yeah, so what the hell was I talking about? Can't remember. June. It's a bit slow, but oh my God, it was beautifully made. Dated.
Yep.
The new version again, it's a bit slow because that's the style and that's how the book was written, and it's very descriptive, very thing, and everything. And there's a lot going on. But oh my God, it's beautifully made.
Yeah, visually, it's beautiful. It's
I saw it at the IMAX. I thoroughly suggest anybody, if you just watch this at home on a streaming service, you don't get the impact. You need to go and watch it at the cinema or the 4K or preferably the IMAX.
Right.
And it is astonishing.
Like Avatar or something like that. One of those sort of big films where you really need to see it in the best possible form. Okay.
And we should all be going to the cinema every chance we get, or they will close.
Yeah, I do you know what? I've not been since before the pandemic. The last film I saw was Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, and that was 2019. So I know you're right. I mean, the cinema movie industry, but mind you, the Avatar is the second one has just passed 2 billion, which is pretty good. It's in
we
the
had
top 6 films.
2 movies go over 150 billion.
Yep.
This year, so that's not too bad. That's not too shabby.
That would do the cinema market a bit of a boost. But as you say, I mean, I'll just ask very quickly, so we'll go slightly off topic. But do you think that the cinema industry is in danger of imploding at some point soon, or what do you think will happen with that?
I think there'll just be a correction, like there was in the 80s and 90s. That there was a lot of cinemas, the ones that are profitable will close, and they need to change. Like the Cinema by Me has changed in that it's took out like half the seats, and they put in these glorious reclining seats that you can, sleep on. They're amazing. So you only get like, maybe 100 people in there, and it's quite expensive to go.
Right.
But I pay for that thing was like £15 a month. And you go as often as you like, which makes it a lot more, affordable sort of thing. But those ones will survive, and the ones that don't keep up will probably die, like they did in the 80s and 90s. But I think there will be a correction. People like going out, but it needs to be an event as well. There needs to be a restaurant. There needs to be a bar. There needs to be, it needs to be a night out.
The only thing I'm slightly worried about is that nowadays we have these 4K TVs, massive screens, lovely surround sound, good speakers in your own home, and you don't have to worry about someone. I mean, one thing I can't stand if I go to cinema is if someone is like grazes through food like crisps and hot dogs, and it's like it's been like 2 hours just munching and munching and munching. I'm not very good with exterior noises like that, so But as you say, I mean, that's just like anything. I mean, if you're saying that the seating arrangements, the way that they're designed now, is a bit more spacious, a bit more you're part of the cinema to watch properly, then I think you're right. That would certainly be a bit of a boost.
Those are the ones that will survive. I think the ones that are Odeon, that's what Odeon are doing. They're getting rid of all those uncomfortable seats and they're putting all these.
They're adapting to a new market and a new way of entertainment,
making people more comfortable and stuff. But yeah, you'll still get idiots in there, and I still get.
It's the law of averages, isn't it? You're going to get somebody who's going to be annoying or something.
He answered the phone in the movie the other week, and he said, "Hello, I know I'm in a movie." And I goes, "Yes, you're in a movie. Put the phone down."
It's like Trick Happy TV where he used to go, "Hello," like that kind of thing.
Yeah, but it was like that, and I was like, "God, mate, you have never had more people hate you this quickly ever." I mean, that's just like it was astonishing, the hatred in that room, and he didn't get up and walk out. He just sat there.
Oh yeah, I mean, I do a lot of driving for my jobs. I do, and you get some people who just don't give a damn, and it's just the law of averages, right? I can't talk, but you're going to get some people who just disregard what you consider to be normal civilized practices. So let me ask you. I suppose we have mentioned it, but we have to talk about because this is a Stargate channel. Let's just say Stargate is properly created, a new Stargate series, and it's a reboot. What are the pros and cons you foresee if that? I don't want it to be a reboot. We both want it to be a continuation. It's got 20 years of history or whatever. What would you like if they got to go that direction to see?
I have talked about this before, but I mean, it's if they did a hard reboot where they pretended like nothing happened, which we were at risk of.
Yeah.
And I still think we're generally at risk of. The longer we wait, I think the more at risk of a hard reboot we are.
Right.
But there are advantages, and this isn't going to be popular, I'm sorry, but there are advantages to a hard reboot. By the end of SG1, humanity was so advanced. You know, we had spaceships, and we had the we had all of the Asgard weaponry and shields. We were the baddest. We had the baddest fleet out there. We would kick anyone. The Lucian Alliance would have no chance against us. They just had attacks whenever we would just wipe the floor with them. So we all of a sudden are the dominant species in the galaxy. All of a sudden, it's not Stargate anymore. It's Star Trek.
Yeah.
And we're 10 years on again, don't forget. So we're 12 years on since SGU. So a hard reboot
12 years,
does have advantages in that you can start again. A clean slate. But even though my head says that that's not a terrible idea, my heart goes, if you do that, I will burn your house down. Jeff Bezos. And that's for legal reasons. That's not a threat.
Just to clarify,
until May to reach 20k. Thank you, Shelley. I will do my best, my lady. 4,000 to go. So please, guys, if you are new to the channel, like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification. Share the video wherever the hell you want. Shelley is Shelley's our Facebook lady, and she's just phenomenal. And I sent her a she's not a Stargate fan, but I sent her a cup with a Stargate logo on, and let's one more trip through the old orifice, and didn't explain it to her.
And she's still doing stuff for you on Facebook. I'm surprised about that.
She's got a picture of me on the Facebook going, what the fuck is this? But God love her. She's amazing. She's genuinely said, Shelley, I love you. I love you very much. Stop giving money to the channel, or else you do enough.
Well, let's just hope that it's...
What do you think? So that's my thinking. If they did a hard reboot, those are the positives.
Yeah, okay.
But as I said, massive negatives in that there's so much story they'd just be pissing away. And, so much happened, so much... There was such a big part of my life. This is my favorite TV show for like 15 years. It would be difficult if they did it. If they did a hard reboot, it would be very difficult.
I remember I got into it in about 2000, and I started getting the DVDs once a month, and I just fell in love with the series. I think it was on Sky One at one point, and I saw this really low quality, and of course, then you got to get it by. To ask what you see, if they were to if it were to be remade or rebooted, kind of thing, I mean, first of all, you wonder who they would actually cast as the main characters, whether it would be another Daniel Jackson, another Jack O'Neill, or whether it be something slightly different. I assume they'd have to have the same characters. And then, of course, would you then have all the antagonists? Would you have the gold again? Would their eyes still glow? Would you still have similar looking ships? My biggest geeky thing is what they would do, how they would redesign the Stargate, because they technically they redesigned it 3 times in the 3 shows. But I everything to me says that there is still a huge fan base, and so really they've got to find a way, I think, of doing a continuation and maybe slowly easing into it. Maybe they could sort of do like episode 1 is after or during universe, and then it would like they could do like a 5-year jump in the first few episodes to catch up with our real time. Something where you can have a transitional thing so that you got to 2023, you know what's happened since 2011, you know what the Stargate program is, whether it's in the public or knowledge. That to me, it can't work as a reboot. Although I still think it's a possibility, as we've already discussed. So I don't know. I mean, like I said, let's just hope if it does come back, it's going to be a continuation.
Well, what do we think of this core? Because I mean, the Battlestar Galactica, where they said they got the core things right. You know, they kept the Viper, they kept the Battlestar look the same, the general storyline. So they kept the core things, right, and that appeased the fans. What and guys, get into the comments as well and tell me what you think.
That's a good idea. That's a good question.
What core to Stargate that they must not ignore?
Well, if the Stargate has got to look like water when it opens up, I know it sounds dumb, but that is such a iconic visual aspect of Stargate is the physical opening of the gate. I think they've got to do it so that it's similar. I think
is the Egyptian thing core?
Well, it was more medieval in later SG-1. I personally think that the Egyptian aspect of the early seasons of the original movie really worked, because it was based on a lot of real events in life, like the pyramids and all the things that are involved. So I would like it to remain Egyptian-based. What do you think about that? Would you like that?
I think so, because I mean, it was so much based around the ancient aliens theory. That's from Roland Emmerich, who loves the ancient aliens stuff. Every bloody film he makes. It was so intertwined, particularly like you said in the early series. I mean, when they then started to do the TV series and they started to visit other planets, and they were like snapshots in history. So you'd have medieval ones, you'd have Tibetan, you'd have everything. It wasn't just Egyptian. If you actually think about that logically, that made no bloody sense.
It didn't.
But
King Arthur and stuff. Yeah, I mean, it didn't. Yeah. But it still worked, didn't it? It's a strange thing.
Because it was fantasy. It's fantasy, and you ignored it. I mean, all the stone technology as well is like it all looks like stone, but it's actually if you just remove this stone, some crystals behind. Again, makes no sense at all.
No, but you just go with it, don't you?
But you just love it. You just love it. Yeah. So I hope they don't mess around with that too much. But I do think, I think the gate shape, the gate general design, can't mess with.
I hope they keep the sound effects as well, because I love the sound of the Stargate dying.
Yeah, again, and that's an easy way to keep fans on board.
I'm a big sound guy. I love sci-fi sounds to look distinctive, and I've talked to you before about in the future we should do top 10 sci-fi sounds. But yeah, it's got to be that sound of the Death Gliders, the staff weapons.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just don't think I can't see it working in a reboot. I think it would just, unless someone really gets it, they really know what it is. But my fear is that someone will be aware of it. They'll look at about 10 episodes and they'll reinterpret it based on what they think it should be, rather than getting what Stargate is. And only us fans and the people who like Brad Wright, they know what it is. That's the problem, I think.
Well, the one thing that keeps me positive is that they're not going to reboot it. Is not just because the sources that I speak to constantly tell me Amazon don't want to reboot it. They've always said there was 3 plans, and the 3rd plan was hard reboot if everything else failed. But they always talked about that they know there'd be a backlash. Yeah. But Roland Emmerich did an interview, 8 or 9 months ago now, and he was talking about back in 2015 they were going to do
another film based on the original movie. I heard
So they
that.
were actually going to even bring in James Spader and Kurt Russell to actually do.
Wouldn't that have been amazing? Wouldn't it have been
well, yeah.
great? I'd love to have seen that. I
It
would
would
have
have been
checked
a
that
hard
out.
reboot, though. It was going to ignore the TV series and be a direct sequel to the movie. Which
does that suggest
do,
then?
because the TV series is different to the movie. But
my next question was: does that suggest in some ways that the SG1 series is almost like a reboot of the original movie?
it is in a way, but it's not. It's a reimagining in lots of ways. It is a continuation. It's a direct continuation of the movie. But
if they made the new movie, then it would have been more of a discontinuity then, because it was going its own tangent. If they made that second movie, that's what I'm saying.
There was always, apparently Emmerich and Dean Devlin always had a trilogy in mind.
I heard that. Yeah.
And that's what they wanted to make. They wanted to make the trilogy. And then a couple of years ago, they were asked to say, well, would you like to just... MGM were actually looking at maybe we just completely do that trilogy again, just like hard reboot, start again, do those trilogy of movies. And Roland Emmerich was very clear, and he said Amazon and MGM, that all they care about is the TV audience. They don't care about the movie audience.
Okay, I didn't know that.
And that reassured me. And I'm like, right, good. If Amazon is saying the TV audience is what matters, that means SG1, SG8, and SG.
They've got faith in that. Is
what matters.
Right, that's interesting.
So it's us that are fans of the TV series. So that reassures me that there can't be a hard reboot.
Okay.
And there are lots of ways they can do things. My only issue is I don't see how we get a big like SG1 go anywhere, do anything type series that explores the universe in a lot of detail, because as I said, I think that'll be a bit Star Trek-y. But there are so many things they can explore, you know. And somebody mentioned it in the comments a little while ago, and I did a little series a little while ago thinking about, if I was going to do this, how would I create a new Stargate series? And I said, I want to make the Furlings as the antagonist.
Which you've never seen.
And explore the Furlings. Yeah.
That's right. One of the fifth race. It's one of the four races or something.
Yeah.
We only saw them.
Yeah.
We saw them like. Did we see them in one episode, the comedy one, where they looked like Ewoks or something? They were like.
Yeah.
There was some funny aspect to one episode, but they were never properly seen. Yeah, that's it.
That was just Jack O'Neill imagining, though. That wasn't real. But yeah. So and we think we might have seen them once or twice. They hinted 1 to 2 episodes. And we saw their technology once or twice.
Yes.
Like the weather changing device and things. But we never actually saw them in any, thing. So I think that would be really interesting to explore. There's obviously the answering Stargate universe. There's answering where the Atlantis is. There's lots of things they can explore. But I think... Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, what might be an interesting aspect as well is Ascension. What about that kind of aspect where, there could be something where, people are trying to ascend to a different plane of existence? That we had the... what was the race that did those? I can't remember. What was it? Who are the ones that did the Ascension? Ancients, yeah, the Ancients did that. I just think that might be an interesting, maybe not a focus of the show, but that could be a very interesting aspect where it's known that the Ancients did ascend. I don't know, just something I thought of as I said that.
An Ancients prequel for me would be the only time I would actually accept a prequel. I would actually love an Ancients prequel. It's something that's based a million years before, because it can't piddle on canon, because it would be way before SG1, and it could actually add to what we've seen. It could explain a lot of things, a lot of episodes we've seen. There are so many ways they could do an Ancients prequel, and it would be really exciting if they were clever.
In the Ark of Truth, we did see a flashback to where the guy was actually drawing the first Stargate as an idea at one point,
exactly,
which I thought was a nice thing. So yeah, I'd be interested in that. I certainly would. So I don't know. We'll have to see how it goes, I guess. Okay.
Just before we call it an evening, then, because we're at the hour mark, which is generally where I try to end these, because there's only so much talking you can do. I'm old, but
me too.
When we're talking about reboots, and I think Trek guy, I've forgotten your bloody name. Trekgate mentioned it a little while ago. The Babylon 5 reboot plans. So they're still tentative. It still might happen. But with HBO's issues at the moment, I would argue it's probably about 50-50 at best. But again, do you think that's a TV show that deserves a reboot?
Babylon 5 is another show which has had a huge, rich tapestry of characters and story arcs and things like that. And for me, Babylon 5 worked because it was on for 5 seasons. It had a couple of other things as well, and it had time to get the stories to where they went. If we're talking back to what we said about the fact that production of shows now is a lot shorter, there's only 10 episodes per season or something, I would have thought that it'd be difficult to do a show like that, because they would have to surely cut out a lot of elements which made Babylon 5 Babylon 5. I suppose it's possible. What do you think?
Well, for one thing, at the moment, the CW have got first dibs. And if it goes on the CW, we could get 22 episode full season.
Okay.
Which would have to
be. Oh, brilliant! That's right.
Well, you say that the budget would be probably the same as 10 episodes would get on a streaming service. So they're going to have to stretch the budget a lot. But the other strength is that JMS is actually writing it and creating it. So you've got the original creator still in charge, which is a big strength.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that. That is a major factor. That is a really good pro thing.
The other thing is, I think Babylon 5 was one of those series, though, that in an ideal world, you wouldn't reboot it. In an ideal
That's
world,
what I was thinking, yeah.
You would go back and you would digitally remaster it like they did with Star Wars, and you would redo the special effects, and you would
Star Trek: The Next Generation, they did that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah. So do something like that, but they're never going to do that though, because it would cost a fortune, and
although it is getting cheaper. I mean, I've seen the remastered SG1, and I know seasons 9 and 10 were HD, but seasons 1 to 8, and that show, the picture quality got better as the show went on. By about season 4, it's not bad. It's not HD, but they've done a way that it's not too. You know, they have this sort of like effect where they smooth up the edges, and you look almost everyone looks like Kryten from Red Dwarf. They've got this weird kind of angular, smoothed out features. They just don't look human. But I thought SG1, which of course is a widescreen made show, which probably would help them out, was done well. Babylon
I don't
5,
mean just reformatting though. I mean literally with Babylon 5 redoing.
They have to do all the CGI shit, and that's a show
redoing everything. And because that was the weakness of the show, was the special effects.
Because it was very early in CGI.
Yeah, exactly. But nobody's going to pay for that. I just think the characters were so amazing. This is a bit like rebooting Firefly for me. It's very difficult to do because the characters and the actors, were so lovable and well cast. It's very difficult to do that again. And don't get me wrong, it's not impossible, because there's still brilliant character actors today like there were yesterday.
Sure.
But you've got to get fans on board really bloody quickly, because they're going to go into... People will watch the Babylon 5 reboot, but they're going to be watching it with the original in mind, with Jakar.
So they're going to be naturally highly critical of it then because of that.
Yeah. And they're either going to turn on... And like I said, if they ever got around to... And luckily, Disney have got enough sense that even though they've looked at rebooting Firefly... They seem to, the people I speak to seem to say that they're not going to do it at the moment, at least because they can't figure out how to do it and not piss everyone off.
Right.
But the problem is, if they do it, people are going to go into it remembering Nathan Fillion and blah blah blah, and if it doesn't catch them really really quickly, they'll turn on it.
Fizzle out. Yeah, exactly.
And it'll fail. And I think Babylon 5, if they do it right. Because the core story, I think, is great with the shadows and everything else, and I'd love to see what JMS will do with it. And obviously, he's got a story idea he really wants to tell, and I trust him. But oh man, it's risky. It's really
this goes back to what I'm saying. I know we're going to finish, but I'll just quickly say, but it's the same as if Brad Wright was getting involved with the new Stargate series. I would feel, you mentioning that JMS is doing the new Babylon is a huge plus point already. That's bound to give it some credibility of it going through, because us as fans will be looking for that and seeing whether he can create the stuff the magic he made in the 90s. So
reassure a lot of fans that it's going to be all right. And I think it'll calm down a lot of the internet shouting, which can kill a show.
Yeah,
the haters the hate baiters, whatever, on YouTube can kill a TV show really quickly. I mean, look at what it did to Quantum Leap, and it's actually I've watched the first season of Quantum Leap now. It's all right.
I've seen about the first 4 or 5 of the new series. It's okay. I don't love it. I don't dislike it. It's all right.
Yeah,
that's my review of it.
Once he starts remembering, and there's a little bit more intrigue and stuff towards the end of the first 10 episodes, it's actually good.
I've not got there yet.
Yeah, the cliffhanger at the end is actually quite good. But if you listen to the people on YouTube, you'd think it was just an absolute shit show, and it's not. It's an okay show.
No.
But it nearly killed it. Its viewing figures have actually grown. People didn't.
It's getting renewed, though, isn't it? I heard it's getting renewed. I think
it looked like they've had the second half of the first season extended, so it's gone from 10 to 16.
So it's getting extended. Okay, so
they haven't had a renewal yet, and I think it'll depend how it does when it's syndicated abroad.
Oh, right.
Was what I was told.
It's well known. The original is quite well known, so I would have thought it's going to give it at least a positive start. So I have to see.
Yeah. But again, they've had enough sense to make that a continuation, not a hard reboot, which I think was sensible.
His wife, because Al's wife is in it, which the same actress is in it as well. And I thought it was a lovely, and his daughter, of course. Yeah, I thought that's a lovely callback as well. So fingers crossed. Early days for that series, but I'll be watching.
Yeah, but let's say to go back to why does Hollywood do it though? I think we get lots of new stuff, and we get lots of new TV series, new movies, new projects. We get remakes and things. I would love to see a Highlander remake. I think we're due with new special effects and things. I think that is the one movie that I always think about, and I think, fucking, they really need. Henry Cavill is supposed to be signed on to do it, and they need to crack on and do it because it would be brilliant. But there are certain.
Let me tell you a very quick story before we go. I had a friend at work who was a big fan of the actor who played Tanith in Stargate SG-1, who also appeared on Highlander. And she was actually, she was in British Columbia, and she actually knew people who worked on those shows. And she actually ended up in the Stargate studios, and she was in Stargate Command, and she wasn't even a Stargate fan. And I was so jealous of the fact, and because at the time the actor who plays Tanith was in it, and I just thought you were so lucky to imagine being on those sets properly behind the background. So there we go. It's a little story there, but I never forgot that. So there we go. But
they used to run competitions when SG-1 was being filmed. They used to run competitions.
I didn't know that. That's quite a good idea. Fantastic.
Appear on Stargate. But that's been fascinating. But I say, just to round it up, then basically, why do they? Is it laziness, or is it because they run out of ideas? I don't think so. I think they do remakes and reboots because, one, we like them. We like prequels because we like to know what happened beforehand. We like to know what happened afterwards.
More of an idea of a successful thing. Exactly.
It's an easy way to hook us, and I'm sorry that's cynical, but it just is.
Well, I agree. I've said that before. I think it's the easier route to take than sometimes going with a brand new concept and having less of a chance of it actually taking off, which is a shame. But it's in the end, it's down to the dollar, isn't it? It's down to the buck. So
and these shows are ridiculously expensive to make. Yeah. So it's a significant investment. So
and which means that they're going to be less confident because they're investing more in a potential flop.
Yeah. And they know they're like Lord of the Rings. They knew they were guaranteed a core audience. They knew it.
Yeah.
And even if the show wasn't very good, which you can argue about, they knew they were getting a core audience. When they get a Stargate reboot, and the other thing is as well, is generating interest. So the Ark TV show gets greenlit to be made. Nobody barely notices. They start talking about makers of Stargate, makers.
That's how it starts to get
prick up their ears. When Stargate gets greenlit, which I'm confident it will, people are going to go crazy. People will take notice, and that's the thing. It's free, easy advertising, which is why reboots, sequels, remakes are easier.
Yeah,
and that is sad truth, really. But in another way,
it's understandable. You can understand those to a degree why they would go live. They're not fans. They're business people. They want to make profit. They want to make a lucrative new franchise or a new idea. And the best way to do it is to reboot an old franchise or idea. And I think that's the way it's going to be.
if we keep watching it, they'll keep making it.
Yeah, pretty much.
They're going to reboot Superman again.
Oh, I'm
They
sorry.
just-
Christopher Reeve is my only Superman. I'm not bothered with all the other Supermans.
Well, they just rebooted Batman for the millionth time.
I saw that Batman versus Superman film, and I thought it was shite about 10 years ago. I couldn't stand
I really enjoyed Batman versus Superman.
I didn't like that. No, my mate, my colleague on the podcast, he loved it. I just couldn't.
Yeah.
I went with my family, and my son was only about 10 at the time, and we looked at it, like, that was rubbish. We both hated it. But again, it's down to the individual, isn't it? You know, sometimes.
Oh yeah, no, that's the way. That's the way of the world. If we like
strange.
the same things, I'm born with life. Don't watch Justice League, then, please.
Okay, I won't. Then if you say don't, then I won't.
I came out of it and I genuinely spent 2 hours just punching myself in the dick to try to distract myself from what I was watching. Just sort of like, I would look up at the screen. It's like, oh, fuck's sake.
I hope you didn't post a review somewhere, but it might be an interesting review on Internet Movie Database or something.
It would have just me sat there going, oh, I've punched myself a bit too hard.
Oh, God.
It's awful. And honestly, it's nonsensical at times. It's just awful. But yeah, it killed the DC, and it should have done. But anyway, Mike from Solar One, there is a link in the description to your channel.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on board. It's been really nice.
You are.
I hope I could come back again at some point, because I think I could talk about all this stuff, as you could probably tell. So if ever you want somebody to be part of the crowd of people talking about whatever, then please give us a shout, and I'll be happy to be on board.
Mike, you are welcome. It's literally any time, and vice versa. If ever you got a topic I can be bothered to talk about,
I'll keep you in mind. Thanks very much, Jay.
But honestly, thank you very much. Guys, as always, everybody in the comments, you've been sensational. Thank you so much. I have to kill time here for a second, because I have to find the end screen button.
Okay.
And I will just I'm just going to run a quick advert for you. Just 1 second.
9chevrons.com. 9chevrons.com is your dedicated source for Stargate news, which will aim to complement this YouTube channel with news that we have from our contacts at MGM and Amazon, breaking news about a new potential Stargate series, as well as providing reviews and any potential updates to news stories that we break. Check out some of the news articles that we have already at 9chevrons.com.
Thank you very much, Matty. Mike, thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Next time, sir.
All the best.
Good night. Good night, everybody.
Bye.